The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
Okay, so this is our second session with Phil Scarff. Please welcome him. Coming back. So we're going to have our presentations based on the design assignment that Phil came up with. So who would like to go first? And I'll speak of this.
I would, but my partner's not here yet.
All right.
Me too.
All right, we'll go first.
There you go. Thank you.
So who's we?
Us three. Yeah.
Oh,
Or us
okay.
two.
All right.
So,
Can you tell us your design?
so we chose a rod. We decided on the notes C, D flat, F, G, and B flat.
C, D flat, F, G, B flat. Okay.
And we went with the kind of more traditional, where you start out slow and you slowly expand the range, and then you add in more players, and then you like play a melody line together, and then you can like alternate whoever's improvising.
Okay.
And then we did a little bit of extrapolation halfway through by changing one of the notes in the rag, actually.
Okay.
And just for a little different style, and then we go back at the
Okay.
end and finish in the rag.
Okay. Cool.
We're gonna go. You wanna go over there? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Very good. That was very impressive. So, so let me just ask the performers. So did that performance go the way you envisioned it going? And since we're improvising, you never know what's going to happen when you improvise, right? So I'm just curious if that's the way you had planned for it to go, or you thought that anything might have been different.
When I was describing it, I said there was a section where we changed one of the notes of the rock.
Yes, that's right.
That didn't happen.
That didn't happen. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep.
We at the end we had the option of going into that or stopping.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
I mean, we sort of knew vaguely what different sections were going to be like, and sort of vaguely what we would try and do with them.
Yeah.
But that was completely different to what we'd run through it a couple of times before today. That was kind of different to what we've done before. So, and it just happened.
That's improvisation. It should be different.
Yeah,
That's actually the
exactly,
point. It should be different. If you start doing the same thing over and over again, it's no longer improvisation, right? So that's great. Good. So any comments from anybody else? Any thoughts? Yeah.
There was a couple of times when you played unison, and I didn't really see sort of like any cues into those sections. So I was just wondering if you were all improvising, how did you move from the sort of improvisational section to the unison section?
We had sort of this one particular melody, so when one person started, like we could recognise that melody, so when one person began it, we all joined it. And there was a couple of times we repeated it, so one person would get to the end of it, and then we'd go straight into it again. We don't know to come into it.
Any other comments?
I'll just say that I thought it worked very well as a composed improvisation. In other words, I thought the framework was well thought out, and the realization through improvisation made a lot of sense. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think you really captured the frameworks very well. Why don't you tell us about it, because everybody needs to know.
Okay. So basically, we stuck with we came up with our own scale to base the improvisation on, and we decided to look into the range and note density frameworks at first. So we're each starting in different parts of our register, which is sort of maybe different than the way it would be done traditionally, perhaps. But then we'll move out and expand, which is pretty similar to some of the stuff that happened with Metrage. And then we'll also be moving from pretty simple melodies and pretty simple routines into more complicated things that come up, and we'll try to then get into it won't start with a rhythm, but then we'll try to get into a rhythmic groove later on in the minute and fade everything out.
Right, and one more thing, like, I'm going to start with the drone to sort of imitate the tambura, and we're going to add ornamentation to the melodies to imitate the chicharina.
Okay. Sounds good. So any thoughts about that piece? So did the performance, did you think that went the way you expected? Did you do anything different than you were thinking about?
I'd say in general, like the note density and range are limited. We were hoping sort of to get a motive in there, but I don't think anything really.
Yeah, we were gonna just let it develop organically.
Right.
But we just kind of more played off each other and then
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
repeated anything.
And the rhythm wasn't 3-3-2 like we were predicting, but
We did get
it
something.
did settle.
We did get something.
Yeah, it did become rhythmic. It's partway, about halfway through. But yeah, good. Anything else from the performers, maybe? Or
It sounded like you introduced the rhythmic feel.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
And then you jump right on.
Well, yeah, I used the bass to really.
But that was very good listening because it didn't take more than a second or two to really coalesce, which was very nice.
yeah.
And how about the ending? Had that been thought about it? That was just going to happen as it
I mean,
happened?
we planned to just kind of bring the range back in, basically, to where we had been in the beginning. And just let it like kind of not fade out, literally fade out, but like kind of let the effects fade out.
Yeah. That worked out great. Anybody else have any comments, any thoughts or observations? Yeah.
Well, at the beginning, I sort of thought the piano player was just going to drone on for the entire song and just sort of be that drone. And I was sort of waiting for him to come in, and then finally, sort of felt relieved when he like came in and like built upon the violin.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have any unison melodies planned, so I didn't want it to be like really dense too early.
I liked it.
But I mean, I thought that was nice, because we had one sort of solo voice with a kind of accompaniment, and then it became more of a duet. So there was a sort of element of progression there.
Another thing we didn't anticipate is like Austin sort of focused on the mid-upper part of the scale, and I was just doing like the first 3 or 4 notes.
Yeah.
So that sounded kind of interesting.
Great. Anything else? Cool. Should we move on, Mark? Okay, next group.
So I actually didn't come up with my own scale. I just decided to use the D-Dorian mode because I'm really, it's a little bit more comfortable for me to play around with. My sort of vision is to have the piano form like sort of drone on like a low D, and use that, so like drone, and then as a little bit goes on, kind of build up into like a tremolo as use feels necessary. Starts with a little bit of free time with the guitar and sax, but then I do have a sort of melodic motif that I was going to center it around. So this is the yeah.
Can I just ask, is the melodic thing like a rag or a scale idea? Or?
I just came up with something on the guitar.
So are there any specific frameworks from the set of 12 that we're using here?
I was looking at sort of the, I can't remember, there were 2 that I was definitely looking at. I was looking at like a little bit of note density.
Yes.
Kind of applying it towards the lower notes, or the lower end. So the drone kind of like gets a little bit of freedom in terms of picking how fast he wants to like do a little bit of tremolo, like through the rhythmic framework, I guess.
So is the note density going to change throughout the piece? Is that, or not?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, do you have a view of how that would change, or is that going to be improvised?
I sort of envisioned it as starting out like slow, building up, more dense, a little faster, then slowing down towards the end.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the other one I was looking at was, I guess for me, was like using the framework, the little melody, I guess, and then kind of working that around a little bit. I can't remember what it's called on the framework.
Oh, the cellon, maybe?
I think so.
That's what you mean, melodic motif?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. That was great.
I realized I had to turn up like my amplifier halfway.
I like that amp. That's pretty convenient.
Yeah. It's nice. Does run out of batteries every now and then, though, so that's the downside.
Yeah, right.
You know, just jamming out and having something that you can carry in your pocket.
That's nice.
Bag.
Yeah.
Right.
So any comments from the performers? I'm particularly interested in what the collaborators may think about this, since they didn't have much notice
Yeah.
before playing the piece.
I mean, I didn't have any idea what it would be like going into it, but I guess having the frameworks really set up an expectation of like, you know, gradually increasing the note density and the range. And having the motif definitely
Yeah.
helped.
That motif was cool.
Mhm.
And, you know, the way it was used was good.
Yeah, I think it was just enough to provide, like, you know, a cool little phrase to kind of work on.
Yeah.
Still, leave it or not.
That was sort of that was one of the visions I had.
Yeah.
So
That was great. The first group that's used Cellin, the Cellin framework. So that's good. Great. Any other comments? So what about the designer? Do you have any comments about how this went?
I just didn't know what to expect going into it because, again, like this, I just sort of did this myself yesterday, and I didn't know what the performers would sort of think going into this, and so it really, I guess, it depended from the outset. I knew, I guess the piano sort of provided like the rhythmic background, I guess, and that kind of set the overall tone, and then I sort of came in with some free time before I settled into the motif, and then everybody sort of settled around that as well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Anybody else have any thoughts, observations, comments? Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that motif. It really sort of brought it all together, and I think it gave the collaborators, you know, it seemed like it gave them a really solid base to start from and sort of build off of. It seems like a cool way to improvise and make a framework. Just start with a tiny motif and then see where you take it from there.
Exactly, and then, you know, the listener also gravitates towards that as well. Every time it comes back, you feel it's familiar material, you know. And I think, in fact, I think that kind of that illustrates, I think, one of the attractive elements of Indian classical music is the use of Cellin, even if it's something you haven't heard before. By the time you finish hearing it, you've heard the Cellin, some of the key phrases. You've heard them so many times, sounds familiar. So, like this motif. By the time we finished, it sounded like a familiar piece, even though none of us had heard it before, except perhaps the composer but yeah, so it's nice. Any other thoughts? So what's your framework? Can you tell us about your framework?
Yeah, okay, so basically, we kind of used, based off like a challenge in terms of, we have like a motive, like a melodic motive that we start out with.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're gonna later on build on it by adding some chords, and then while one person plays like the melody, the other person will like improvise on it instead.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and we would.
We had wanted a meet.
Yeah, if you wanted, yeah,
between us with this.
to, yeah. Do you have the sheet of the melody?
You'll
Okay.
learn it,
Okay.
though, I'm
Well,
sure.
yeah, okay. You'll get the melody after we play it like 4 times.
Yeah, sorry.
So basically, we're just going to, us two will play it, and then you can come in like, I don't know, after 4 times or something after we, yeah. And then we'll take turns like improvising while one person just plays like drones on like a D. Yeah, that's all. Okay.
Good. So any thoughts? How did you think it went?
I think it went pretty well. I think originally we were supposed to like play the melody, then harmonize a little bit to it, and then kind of stretch out from that melody. But then in the end, we just started improvising instead. So I guess that worked out.
But there was harmony introduced.
Yeah.
As the as the improvisation evolved too. So it's cool. Any other comments or thoughts? How about the flutist?
I was playing an F natural for too long. I was like, there's probably not an F sharp in the scale. There's a B flat in the scale. And I was getting really confused. Like, oh, so my bad.
No, it sounded
Good. Anybody else? Any comments? Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool how like the rhythmic component of the melody kind of like became stronger almost throughout. Kind of, it was like a little more free in the beginning maybe when you started the first time, and then like you started tapping and then you started strumming along, and then it was almost like a very like driving.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, good observation. And it was very effective too.
So that's the second one that did that, where it evolved into the rhythmic structure. It's an interesting way to do it.
Okay, so this is a D Mixolydian rather than picking other scales. And sort of the framework we put it up by person. So Jamie is going to set up a low drone at the beginning. It's going to be once Jamie has his low drone, the flute and trumpet come in on sort of rubato type lines. And then the flute and trumpet explore different frameworks. So I start in a low range and work upwards. Flute is going to start with low note density and gradually increase density. And sort of that's all we have during, and also Jamie is going to gradually adopt a rhythmic progression and eventually start playing Jala. And I think you said the Jala will be in different like rhythmic groups, so that we also have a little bit of like Hari, a rhythm play. And then that'll go on for a minute or two. We don't really have specifics of what's going to happen in there, just to improvise. And at the end, I drop out, flute drops out, and then Jamie just sort of continues with the drone and fades out.
Nice. So do we have any thoughts from the performers?
Thought it went pretty well.
Yeah.
We just sort of set up the framework last night and just ran through it once. We were like, all right, we'll do something like that, and it sort of turned out similar manner.
Yeah.
Had sort of the same feel.
Good.
And yeah, I think it went well.
Great.
I don't think it sounded like quite as say Hindustani as like a rag, but still using the frameworks, like it had the same idea, and it was easy to communicate to someone who just heard the framework today what to do.
Yeah. Right.
I like the rhythmic on the banjo. It really sort of.
Yeah.
So you sounded almost like a mix between a tabla and something. I'm not quite sure what else. Maybe
Yeah, I almost wanted to
I'm
play
not
it on
sure.
my lap like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe more like a sarod. Actually, it's a little like a sarod, which is more, yeah, played with the pick, and it's got more of an attack. Cool. So I liked, well, let me hear, how about the flutist? Did you have any, because this is the first time you had been introduced to the piece. Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. It was easy to follow. So when he said it, the rhythm was just easy to like go along, just stay in the scale.
Yeah. Cool.
You're a utility infielder. We bring you in whenever we need another player.
That's good.
Thank you for that.
I was going to say, I thought it was cool because you had, the way you used the frameworks, you had assigned different frameworks to different people, which was interesting. First time I think we did that today. So that was cool. Good idea.
Yeah, I really like playing it because it sort of like fit my instrument very well,
Yeah.
So I could do like the slower bluegrass picking and just leave that D open the entire time pretty much, and that leaves a nice drone at the low D, and that makes it sort of easy to play around on the top 3 strings, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Cool.
I think actually the reason we split up frameworks is the first time we decided what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah and I were just like, yeah, we can both do range, we can both do note density, and then we ended up running through the piece once, and I focused more on range and she focused more on note density. So we said, well, why not just make that the framework instead?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That was a very cool idea. Excellent.
Do you want to try yours?
Yeah, sure. At the risk of overworking the flutes, can I ask one of you guys?
Got it.
Alright, cool. So, like most of the other groups, the frameworks, the frameworks we were thinking of using are range and note density again.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to start like toward the lower end of the range and then gradually work up, and then vice versa from the oboe. So I guess rhythmic progression is just like a natural part of that as well.
Okay.
And yeah, so we were thinking of playing in concert G natural minor. And yeah, so we were going to start off just alternating with one person doing a drone on the concert G, and then the other person just kind of soloing off of that, and then just interchanging a few times, maybe like 2 or 3 times or whatever, and then gradually working into playing together. If that makes sense.
That's cool. And did you have a specific idea about the rhythmic progression, how that would work?
I mean, just like in the vague sense of gradually speeding up as we progress. Starting off with like slower, sustained, cool notes kind of, and then working into like faster rhythms.
Yeah.
And I guess we kind of wanted to work some challen in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any kind of like set phrase we wanted to repeat. I guess it's something we just kind of wanted to figure out as we go.
Yeah.
And if we find something worth holding on to, then we'll do that.
Great. Okay.
Okay, so you want to start? Sure.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, you're just coming into this cold, right?
Yeah.
So I noticed you were watching it. Had you determined that you would sort of watch each other and sort of do those phrases toward the end and synchrony?
So that was just based off he said that he wanted to do something with a challenge, so I was trying to pick up some sort of like very distinctive note phrases and see whether I could like transfer them, put them into different ranges and things like that. So I picked out like a couple and just tried to repeat them and then put them in different notes with the same rhythms and things like that. But by and large, yeah, most of it was just like, oh, that sounds nice, maybe I'll just do it.
Well, I personally thought it was very good the way that worked out and very interesting the way that all synchronized. I mean, it was like you had planned it, which obviously you didn't, but.
Yeah, I think it worked.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, one problem we ran into when like Ben and I were rehearsing was just like when we got toward the end each time and we tried to make the rhythm go faster, it kind of became more difficult to play, you know, in synchrony because there's just so much, you know, wildness going on. But yeah, I think we pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else have comments?
Yeah, you could really tell. You could you know, find that challenge and, you know, the motive that just kept on being repeated and played off of, and I think it worked out nicely.
Yeah. Great. Anybody else?
I was just thinking that it would be interesting, and we could do this through the magic of taping, to have played all of these exactly in sequence, and then hear them as a unified suite, which we could do through the mystery of taping. To Kurt, who's listening.
Yeah.
Because it was very interesting how we sort of started with the slower, at least that's what I remember, the slower idea, and then doing some things. Then we got more rhythmicized as we got to the middle, and then we had this as the ending thing, which was, well, your thing just before that, and then this thing at the end, which is very different than what we've had. Pretty interesting.
Cool. No, it sounded good. Thank you. So what I thought is maybe as a group, we can try some of the frameworks that didn't get selected for today's assignment. So I was thinking, you know, why don't we do, I forget what I called it, the constrained range. What did I call that one? Confined range. Okay, so there's one called Ton's confined range, and then we have the expanding and contracting tons. So maybe we can try those. And let's actually, why don't we, as a group, figure out a design. Why should I say what the design is? Let's use those frameworks. And who wants to volunteer? Who wants to give us an idea of how we could start? Maybe, or how to use the frameworks. I see an elbow going up. You got to be careful. It's like, you know, you're at an auction, and if you you do something like that, you just bought it, you know. Okay, well, I know you guys have been thinking about these for a while. Yes, go ahead.
How about we normally with range we start low and then go high. Why don't we start high and slowly incorporate the low notes?
That's fine. That's cool, and so that takes care of range. But let's who can think of what to do with this confined range idea, and then expanding and contracting. What could we do with those two things? When you say start high and move low. Did you mean start? You have the confined range tons.
Higher than just not at
Okay, so the confined range tons will start high, and then what are we going to do?
Expand them slowly out.
So expanding. Okay, right. So expanding more down because we're going to start high. So expanding them down, right? So then, and when we do the expanding and contracting, these are more like linear. So you're kind of going up and down, progressively up and down, and making. So you would make the point. If you're expanding downwards, you'll start here and go down and back up, and then go down farther and back up, and then farther and back up. And every time you go progressively farther and farther, and then. Is that it, or anything? Anybody else have anything else to add?
Maybe when we can contract the top note so that the top end of the range is getting lower, and then we can track
Great.
down to like the bottom tonic.
That is a killer idea. I love that. Okay, so that's good. And then, anything else? I think that's enough. So I think we can play with that. So let's just review. Let's review this one more time. I'll make sure I got this right. Okay, I'm going to try to summarize what I think we're doing. So we're starting with constrained range or confined range tons, which are fast lines, as opposed to these slow lines, which everybody's been starting with. So we're starting with something fast. But you got to pick just a few notes, like 3 or 4 notes, and just stick with those notes and just keep playing fast passages using those notes. And then after a while, we're going to start doing expanding and expanding tons, expanding downwards, all right, progressively farther downwards, and then start doing it, but reducing the upper part of the range, and then wind up with some probably constrained range ton at the bottom. Yeah. Okay, great. So any questions or anything about that? Does that reflect what you guys wanted to do? Okay.
Do we want to pick a mode or a key?
You know, that's a great question. I'm tempted to say no, because everybody's doing that. So I think we should do something different. My 2 cents is no. But if
pick a note to center on them?
no,
Nothing.
I wouldn't pick. That's just my 2 cents. Because everybody seems to be still worrying about the modes and the scales and all.
Like a dozen of us will get.
Okay, if you guys feel free to override me. My 2 cents is I wouldn't get too worried about it. But if you want to pick a starting note, maybe that might be good.
So you could try both.
Sorry?
You could try it twice. You just try it with that start and see what it sounds like.
I'm sorry. Say it louder.
I said we could just try both. We could just try it as you say first, and then see what it sounds like.
Yeah. But that's because, hey, we can always do it again. So let's try it without defining this overly defining this too much, and see how it goes. And then we can talk about it and see if it's something we want to change. How about that? All right. So I'm going to let you guys start maybe I won't even play. I'll let you guys play. Why do I need to play? Is everybody ready? Okay. So, any thoughts about this?
I mean, one thing I noticed is by the time we ended, I think most people had already done the contracting and I hadn't.
Mm.
And it was just very difficult to listen to other people to figure out what part of their range they were in, since everyone was in a different part of their range.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was, I couldn't just listen to the, to the sax and be like, oh yeah, he's in the low part of his range, because, listening to the flute or the banjo would like get me sort of confused about what range everyone was in.
Yeah.
It was hard to pick someone to listen to.
Well, there's so many people
Yeah.
playing. It's pretty thick with everybody playing. The thing is, in Indian classical music, of course, normally there would be one lead performer, one lead melodic performer. There might be two if it's like a jugalbandi or duet kind of program. There would typically be an accompanist or even two, but they would be playing a much more secondary role, usually. So we wouldn't have this kind of size ensemble. Wouldn't happen. So these frameworks really, we can certainly apply them to a large ensemble. So traditionally, it wouldn't be like this. Any other comments or thoughts about it?
I felt like we sort of ended up finding a not modal center, but there was like we had some type of tonal center of some sort. I don't know. I felt like we got there.
It's sort of, yeah, I think you're right. I think it sort of emerged.
I thought you all started on it.
Oh.
Sounded to me like you were all, I don't know what that note was, but anybody else notice that?
Well,
I think we all started on
the place.
I mean, that was after all that discussion, and then everybody just intuitively said, okay, we're gonna do it, right? That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And again, I was the only non-playing observer, but it's, the thing that I mean, in addition to this concept of the density and the range increasing and all that kind of thing, contracting, you're also dealing with texture. So the whole thing could be looked at as an exercise in texture in a way, particularly the beginning part and the last part, as I was hearing it, which is interesting, which means that your specific contributions, it's the overall that's the more important, to me anyway. I don't know what you think about that.
I don't know. It's with so many people playing. It's everyone has their own contribution. Everybody's listening, and there's so much going on. It's hard to say. Some people are probably trying to pick out what one or two, maybe what one person is doing, or maybe others are kind of trying to hear the overall sound. It's when you have so many people improvising, it's challenging to figure out how to fit in and everything. Yes.
I thought, speaking about fitting in, like I think this was the first time in this class for me at least that I wasn't like trying to fill a space. I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna go, because we had talked about like really, I guess, having that type of texture. And I think like most of the time, like when we improvise, like somebody starts something and then somebody else comes in and is like trying to fill a space that they left.
Yeah.
And this was different because like we were just like, who cares about each other's space, and just like went all over it. So that was cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think one thing that really would have helped is if we trickled in at the beginning. That way we could have, sort of set like a.
I liked it. I mean,
I'm not
we've
saying it's
never
bad or
sounded
anything.
like that before.
But,
The effect is pretty strong.
But I feel like we did sort of start funneling in. I feel like the beginning just started as like sort of chaos. Like everyone was doing something different, but we did start to funnel in towards the end. I mean, we might have been funneling into 2 different places or 2 or 3 different places, but we were funneling.
Yeah. Well, part of improvisation can be chaos. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. And then so that's part of the game. If it goes into chaos, then where does it go from there? Does something start to gel, or come together? It's interesting. Is improvisation, especially when you're doing it with a group, it has like a life of its own, and then everybody's kind of going with that. Anything else? What else? Okay, cool. So let's try, I'm thinking of trying something different. Let's try, okay, I'll take ideas. Ideas about how to set up an improvisation which uses, let's say we want to use the constrained range. I want to do this constrained range, confined range. Okay, we'll use the confined range idea, but this time we're going to extrapolate it, and instead of picking notes that are close together, pick 3 or 4 notes that are far apart and use that. But I also want to change this density so that it's not continuous high, like everybody playing all the time. So I want to solicit some ideas about how we should do that. How can we make it thinner?
Well, you could sort of not necessarily designate, but I guess designate people who would be more drone, like lower, longer pitches, and who would be sort of higher melodic type.
Okay, so we can take have different roles.
Yeah, that way we can sort of differentiate between that, and not everyone's trying to just do melody.
Okay, that's a cool idea. So we have like by default people would be droning, and then those who are going to play the so-called lead part would emerge.
And yeah.
Okay. Yes.
We could maybe have like a shifting window of who, like maybe 2 or 3 people at a time who are sort of out there trying to make a new motive, or kind of even for the people who aren't just droning, they might be playing something, but maybe designate a sort of like moving group of people, not any one, but like that can experiment more, I guess.
Playing the lead, we'll call it lead and drone, just to differentiate the roles, right? So having small groups of 2 or 3 people at a time playing the lead, right? Yeah, that's a good idea. So, any thoughts about how would we implement that? How are we gonna know who's gonna play the lead part at any given time? Any ideas?
You can just start with like first 2 or 3, and then when one drops out, the next person.
Okay, that's fine. Cool. So we'll start with 3. When the first person drops out, the next person adds in. That person drops out, the next person adds in, and we work our way across the room. How about that? Okay, great. So,
for the entire group?
Now,
for the, like melodic, like melody?
This is for the lead part. By default, everyone's going to be droning, more or less all the time.
Okay.
And then when it's your turn to play the lead part, you jump out, you emerge out of that, and you go into the lead part. And I was just thinking also that maybe we should put in one more element here, like a note density element. And let's. Well, yeah, everybody's gonna pick like 3 or 4 notes, which don't have to be the same notes, and you can pick whatever notes you want, and you can base it on what the people are playing who played before you, or not. It's up to you. But let's do this. Let's start it at a very high density and work our way to a low density. Okay, but still, the notes should be rapid. So to achieve a low density with rapid notes, what you have to do is maybe play a few notes and stop, play a few notes and stop, so that it's not as dense, but when you play the notes, you're playing rapid lines. Okay, so let's not play sustained. The lead players should not be playing sustained notes, right? It's only the droners who are playing sustained. And let's do the drone. Let's pick a note. Who wants to pick a note for the drone? A tonic? F. Okay, cool. So let's start, and we're going to start over here and work our way around. 3 people at a time. Okay? Is everybody ready? right, good. So, comments? Sorry, you like that better? Okay. How well do you think we followed the framework or the design?
We followed it pretty well.
You think so?
It seemed like we were keeping to the groups of 3.
Yeah, we were keeping to the groups of 3.
We didn't
That's
do
true.
the
I was kind of helping that
Yeah, you were
along.
definitely
Yeah, because it was sometimes it was getting hazy. But yeah,
I didn't hear the change in note density, I guess.
Yeah.
yeah, the change in note density I think didn't really seem to happen. It wasn't too obvious. Maybe a little bit, but it wasn't nearly as pronounced as I was hoping it would
I
be.
guess I wasn't sure exactly what that meant when like you described it.
Yeah, well, I'll try. I'm just going to try demonstrating that if my read. Oh man, I'll tell you, this weather is when it's cold and it's dry in here, the reed dries out. But while we're talking, I'll try to get this resolved. Picking 3 or 4 notes and only playing those notes. I was hearing like scales and different things going on, which wasn't really part of the design. So that was the other observation I had.
I thought we were just supposed to start with 3 notes and then sort of build out, like
Oh.
expand the range.
I wasn't. That's not what I had in mind. But I mean, that's certainly a possibility. But it wasn't what I was trying to communicate.
If I could just interject, it's almost the most difficult thing is to stay with a reduced parameter. So 3 or 4 notes, that's really hard. Because our inclination always is to expand. So the idea of staying with this limited, whatever it is, range or density or something, that's one of the hardest things to do. So just something to keep in mind. We'll probably try to work on that as we go forward.
Yeah, I agree. That's true. It's a very natural tendency to start once you start with whatever the parameter is. You try to build something. Okay, so for example, I'm going to pick 3. I'm going to pick 3 notes and just play some rapid lines with just 3 notes. So that's pretty high density. To go to the lower density without reducing the speed, you just leave space. So like that, you can reduce the density without changing the speed. So that's more like what I was thinking about. So I don't know if we want to try it again. Maybe try it again with that in mind and see what we can do.
So just time-wise, we have room.
How much time we have?
Time for one more thing.
Yeah, okay. That's cool. So we'll do this. So let's just we'll do the same basic thing with everybody droning by default, and then we'll have our window of 3. And I may have to, I may just do the same thing. So let's just start.
Still on the F?
Yeah, still on the F. Yeah. Nice. Okay, we still have a couple minutes, right? Okay, any comments?
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
You did a better job.
Yeah, that was much better. Much closer to what, what we were trying to do. Yes, good. So how did that feel? Did it feel, try to compare the last two from the performer's point of view. How did it feel to play those two?
I think on like it was interesting because you look at it on like a micro scale, like each individual person was playing this sort of like random chaotic assortment of just 3 notes, and but like when you look on the macro level, like when everyone was playing together, it actually sort of made sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you just listen to each individual part, it really didn't make sense. It was just sort of random.
Okay. Anything else? Other comments?
I feel like high density is also just as restricting as like low density. In the sense that like there's only like certain like things that you can play if you're forced to play fast. There's like there's like certain things you can play when you're forced to play slow.
Right.
But you're restricted to those things.
Well, it's it's as opposed to having a full palette of all possibilities.
Restrictive is a bad thing. I meant like, it's definitely more constrained than I expected.
Yeah, you have to work within certain limitations, and that it generates a certain thing. So it's and you can these kind of concepts. It's great to think about it ahead of time and have this design worked out, and then try to implement the design. But you can also spontaneously just play and use these ideas, as you go, and let the framework or let the whole design itself kind of evolve, spontaneously. It doesn't have to be, something that you planned out beforehand.
Yes. And the one thing I would say is I thought everybody, the two, comparing the two, is the second one, everybody was listening much more closely, I thought, which is why I think it worked out better, because you got to listen as much as you make your individual contribution.